Welcome back, Year 5. In today's math lesson, we're continuing our work on angles. We'll be bringing back an old skill of calculating angles on a straight line, or when we worked on supplementary angles. Our learning intention is to calculate missing angles on a straight line based on knowledge of 180 degrees as a half turn, or that straight line. So if you did the supplementary angles lesson not last week but the week before, you'll be set for this one. It's going to be super easy. Alright, so for our warm-up, I want you to calculate the size of the missing angle, x. As you can see, we have a straight line called M, and on that straight line, there's a 118 degree angle and angle x. Think about it. How can you work out what x is worth? What do you know about straight lines? That's your hint. I want you to take a moment, pause the video, see if you can figure out x, and then I'll be back to tell you how you can do it. Alright. Well, what you should know about the straight line called M is that it's 180 degrees. All straight lines are 180 degrees. So if we know that that straight line is 180 degrees, we can figure out what x is by taking away the other angle. Because 118 plus x should add up to 180 since they're on that straight line. So let's take 118 away. When I do that, I'm left with 62. So that tells me that angle x is worth 62 degrees. And I can double check that if I add those two angles together. 118 plus 62 gives me 180 degrees. So I know I'm correct. That missing angle x is 62 degrees. Now that we've refreshed our memory about supplementary angles and how to work them out, let's look at a simple example from the textbook. Remember, you do not have a copy of the textbook, so you just follow with me on the screen. Under the Discover section, we see Max working with some paper, and the bits of paper he has are shaped like protractors, so that tells me that they're a 180 degree turn, or a half turn. On the board, there are some instructions for him. It says step 1, well, it doesn't say anything, I'm just going by the picture. Well, step 1, he just starts with a piece of paper. Alright, step 2, he needs to measure out an 80 degree turn. And then step 3, he's supposed to cut off that 80 degree turn. And then that angle that's left is labeled A. Let's see what question 1A asks us to do. What is the size of angle A? Well, that's pretty straightforward because we know that these are just supplementary angles. Angle A plus that 80 degree angle that he cut off should add up to make 180 degrees. So I can work out the missing angle by simply subtracting that 80 degree angle from 180 degrees. And when I do that, I'm left with 100 degrees. So the missing angle, angle A, is 100 degrees. That's pretty straightforward. Let's see question B. Max copies the instructions on the whiteboard, but does not measure accurately. He cuts two equal angles instead. What angle does he cut? Alright, so he was trying to do what they told him to, but instead he made angles that were the same size. Well, if he made two angles that are the same size and they have to add up to 180 degrees, I know I can just split 180 degrees in half and find out what those two angles are. So let's do that. 180 degrees divided by 2. 2 can't go into the 1, so I take 2 out of 18 and that goes in 9 times. How many 2's can I get out of the 0? None, so I put back my 0. So that means he cuts a 90 degree angle, or two 90 degree angles. And that makes sense because 90 plus 90 adds up to 180. Or I could think of it this way, 2 quarter turns make a half turn. So that's not too hard. It's pretty easy to work out missing supplementary angles because we know that a straight line is 180 degrees. So we just have to subtract what we don't know. We just subtract what we do know in order to find out what we don't know. Let's try a couple more examples of this. Here's question 1 from the Think Together portion of the textbook. It says, predict the size of the missing angles, then measure to check. Well, I don't want you measuring your screen, so what I want you to do instead of predicting, I want you to actually calculate it. Remember, a straight line is 180 degrees, so if you subtract what you know from the 180 degrees, you're going to be left with the other angle. So take a moment and work out angles A, B, and C. You'll pause the video, and then when you come back, I'll show you the answers. Alright, so what were the answers? Well, A plus 40 should add up to 180. So if I do 180 minus 40, I'm left with 140. For B, I know that 75 plus B should equal 180. So if I do 180 minus 75, I'm left with 105. Finally, for C, I know that 170 plus C should add up to 180. So when I do 180 take away 170, I'm left with 10 degrees. So C is worth 10 degrees. So there are my answers, and I can check them backwards by doing the inverse. Now you all are probably saying that that's super easy, so I went ahead and found some more challenging problems from a website called Math Salamanders. I took just a portion of one of their worksheets, so we're going to look at questions 5, 6, 7, and 8. I want you to work out number 5 on your own, just as like a warm-up to the next 3, which are a little bit harder. Pause the video, work out number 5, and then let's see what it is. All right. So to work out number 5, you should have done 180 minus 72, and that would have left you with 108. So that missing angle there is 108 degrees. And that makes sense because 108 plus 72 adds up to 180 degrees, which is that straight line. But what about question 6? Notice there that it gives us two angles that we know the value of, 35 degrees and 20 degrees, and then we have to find that missing one in the middle. What do? Well, we just add up those angles that we know first, and then subtract that total from 180. It's the same idea. So 35 plus 20 equals 55. So I know that I need to just subtract 55 from 180. When I do that, I'm left with 125 degrees. And I can double check that by adding up all three of those numbers now, 35 plus 25 plus 20. And if that adds up to 180, then I know I'm correct. Keeping that in mind, I want you to work out number 7 and number 8. Remember, when you already know more than one angle, just add up those angles first and then subtract them from 180 degrees to see what's left. So take a moment, work out 7 and 8. Pause the video, of course. All right, so for number 7, the first step you should have followed is adding 90 plus 67. When you do that, you'll get 157. So the two angles we know add up to 157. To find the angle that we don't know, we need to subtract that from 180. So 180 minus 157. And that leaves us with 23 degrees. So that missing angle is 23 degrees. For number 8, there were 3 angles that we already know, 24 degrees, 41 degrees, and 35 degrees. So we start by adding that up. And when we add them up, we get to a nice round number, 100. So all we have to do is subtract 100 from 180 to find what that missing angle is, and we're left with 80 degrees. So, as you can see, it's pretty easy to work out missing angles on a straight line once you keep in mind that a straight line is worth 180 degrees, because then you know all the angles on that straight line must add up to 180 degrees. So if you take away the angles that you know from 180, you'll be left with the angles that you don't know. Since this is a familiar topic, we covered it about a week and a half ago, we're going to move into our independent work now. Alright, your independent work today comes from pages 66, 67, and 68. For all of page 66, you're simply working out the missing angles using the same strategy we applied before, simply subtracting what you already know from 180 degrees to see what's left. When you get to the second page of the independent work, page 67, it gets a little bit trickier just because you're going to have to measure for this one. So for question 3, you're going to need to measure each angle because it's going to ask you to find pairs that are supplementary, that add up to 180 degrees because they can form a straight line. So measure each angle, this is just my recommendation, measure each angle and write how much it's worth. Because when you do that, you'll be able to quickly look at them and see, oh, this adds up to 180 or this adds up to 180. Notice it asks you to find 2 different pairs that add up to 180. So I've put circles around it. Blank and blank would add up to 180, or you can have blank and blank add up to 180. For the B part of that question, it wants you to find 3 angles that add up to a straight line. So that means you're going to need 3 numbers that when you add them all up equal 180 degrees. Question 4 also asks you to find the missing angle, but they've added a little trick in. They've made one of the angles that you do know the corner of a square. So, for example, for the first one, A, you see the missing angle off to the left, then you see the corner of the square taking up space, and then you see an 85-degree angle. Well, to work out that missing angle, you need to take away the angles that you do know. They've told you straight up that one of them is 85 degrees. But what about the corner of the square? How many degrees is that? Remember, the corners of a square are right angles, and right angles are 90 degrees. So don't let that one stump you. It's just like having a 90-degree angle and an 85-degree angle on that line, and then you figure out what's missing. Same for the other one. You have a 60-degree angle, you've got that right angle or a 90-degree angle, and then the missing one that you need to work out. Then there's the challenge. This challenge looks super tough, but when you figure out what it's asking you to do, it's really not that bad. Here's my tip to you, because they want you to figure out the value of the question mark angle. So notice they have 4 different straight lines with angles on them. Don't get confused because there's so much going on. Take it one step at a time. To figure out this problem, you need to start at A. So go to that top right line with a bunch of A's on it. You're going to notice that there's 9 A angles. Think to yourself, there's 9 A angles that make 180. So maybe if I divide 180 by 9, I'll figure out what A is. Then when you know what A is, work out what B is. Go to the left side and work out what the B angle is. Then when you know what A and B are, go ahead and work out what C is. And then when you know what A, B, and C are, you'll be able to find what the question mark is. So this is just a longer process. It's not super hard. And as always, I want you to do that reflection at the bottom. All right, Year 5, that is all for today. Stay safe, and I'll see you soon.